Good evening and welcome to all of you to the FT City Ingenuity Awards. I'm Michael Skopinka, editor of the Financial Times Special Reports. It really is our great pleasure to welcome you here to an event that we've been working towards and anticipating for a very long time. What we're going to hear about tonight are some of the world's most exciting and innovative city projects. These are the projects, the programs, and the ideas that help the millions of people who pour into cities around the world realize the aspirations that brought them there. We're going to be hearing from two distinguished speakers tonight, from Anne-Marie Slaughter and from Dame Zaha Hadid. And a little bit after that, we're going to be announcing the winners of our awards in 4 categories. Our finalists are all here tonight, and we're going to be announcing the most innovative and most sustainable projects in the fields of education, energy, healthcare, and infrastructure. We had a distinguished panel of judges, and what they were looking for was originality, the ability of these projects to make an impact on people's lives, and the ability to sustain themselves. Our judges, who worked under the honorary presidency of Dame Zaha and under the chairmanship of Edwin Heathcote, who is the FT's financial critic. Our judges were Professor Abhijit Banerjee, John Bowers, Sir Terry Farrell, Renier de Graaf, Professor Carlo Ratti, Luann Zerlo, and Bruno Lanvin of INSEAD. I'd like to thank all of our judges for the time and the effort and the careful thought that they put in to the judging process, and we'll be hearing, as I said, who the winners are later. As well as the winners of our 4 categories, we're also going to be announcing an overall winner, the most impressive of the winners of those 4 categories. Now, to introduce the evening, I'd like to invite onto the stage Martin Dixon, the US Managing Editor of the Financial Times, and Francesco Vanni d'Archirafi, Chief Executive Officer of City Transaction Services.
Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for being here to share with us this celebration of original thinking and inspiring action by organisations large and small, designed to make cities better, safer places in which to live. We at the FT are very excited by this evening because these are the very first City Ingenuity Awards, and they represent the culmination of more than a year of thinking, planning, and judging. So what's the point of the awards? Cities can be the pinnacle of civilization and catalysts for individual freedom and advancement, but they can also be incubators of some of the worst poverty and injustice on the planet, and they're growing extraordinarily fast. Half the world's population is now urban, and by 2030 that figure is expected to rise to 70%, bringing with it acute adjustment problems. Indeed, the fragility of the urban environment was brought home very graphically to anyone living in this most sophisticated of cities when Hurricane Sandy swept through 6 weeks ago. There's no single solution to the problems of urbanization, which vary from place to place. But there are many innovations, large and small, that can greatly improve the lives of city dwellers. And the FT City Ingenuity Awards are designed to find the very best of these ideas, the most original, the most impactful, and sustainable. By highlighting them, we hope they can be taken up more widely and exported to new centres to help as many city dwellers as possible improve their lives. The awards have certainly captured the imagination of city organisations. We've had entries from more than 40 countries, from city authorities to community groups, from charities to companies, and from groups working at the very cutting edge of technology to those with simple but very effective low-tech solutions. Whoever wins, all the finalists with us tonight are remarkable and inspiring. Congratulations to them all, and thanks to our eminent panel of judges. The FT is delighted to have City as our partner in developing the awards, and I'm pleased to be able to say this evening that our first year has been so successful that we'll be running the awards again next year. And now it's my great pleasure to hand over to Francesco Vanni d'Archi-Raffi, CEO of City Transaction Services, which provides the infrastructure underpinning trillions of dollars of global commerce between cities every day. Francesco's role at City gives him a keen insight into the issues facing cities, and so do his other concerns. He's a board member of the City Foundation, which supports the economic empowerment of underserved communities around the world. He's vice chairman of Junior Achievement Worldwide, which encourages financial education and entrepreneurship in schools. And he's a board member of Business in the Community, the British charity that fosters corporate social responsibility. Francesco, over to you.
Well, thank you, Martin, for the very kind introduction, and very good evening to all of you. On behalf of my partners at City and myself, delighted to have you celebrate with us tonight all the winners. As Martin noted, I run City Transaction Services. It's really a pleasure for me and for my partners to welcome you to this very special celebration. I want to thank you, our partners at the Financial Times and INSEAD, without whom these awards would not be possible. Special thanks to the FT and Martin for putting together tonight's event. I'd also like to thank tonight's speakers, members of the judging panel, for joining us. Congratulate all of the winners who are here with us tonight. I come, you're all winners of this award. At City, ingenuity is one of our core principles. And as probably you know, we celebrated our 200th anniversary in June, and we're actually in the second quarter of our third century, and there are not many institutions that have survived so long. So we believe that ingenuity is not only one of the important engines of progress, but is one of our core principles. We believe it is the heart of innovation. It accelerates the impact of innovation by addressing challenges with originality. So when I thought about the 18 finalists selected from a pool of applicants from more than 50 countries, I realized that they all have one thing in common. They all share our passion for progress. They're willing to try. They're willing to fail. They're developing solutions that inspire others to innovate. And they believe in the power of individuals and communities to be global change agents. Ultimately, they're making a positive impact in the cities in which we all live and operate. That virtual circle that is so much in need today. I commend all the finalists. Our communities are better because of your efforts. There are powerful forces reshaping the world today. Globalization, digitalization, urbanization, climate change, as you mentioned. All of these issues are too big for any one sector of society to address on its own. I believe they're our collective responsibility. For a city economy to thrive, its business sector must be strong. For business to be strong, there must be a healthy and safe banking system. And for business and banks to thrive, there must be urban leaders and policymakers creating the conditions for success. And as tonight's finalists demonstrate, we do have the ability to harness our resources, technology, know-how, to mobilize, to be part of the solution, and to drive progress in the communities where we and our families live, so that we're all better off because we're there. Tonight, we're excited to celebrate those who are leading from the front. Thank you once again for joining us. Celebrate. Martin, back to you.
Thank you, Martin and Francesco. It is now my pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker of the evening, Anne-Marie Slaughter. Anne-Marie is the Bert G. Kerstetter 66 University Professor of Politics and International Affairs at Princeton University. From 2009 until 2011, she served as Director of Policy Planning at the US Department of State, the first woman to hold that position. After leaving that post, she wrote an extremely widely read and commented upon article for The Atlantic called "Why Women Still Can't Have It All," in which she said, "I am all for encouraging young women to reach for the stars, but I fear that the obstacles that keep women from reaching the top are rather more prosaic than the scope of their ambition." Foreign Policy magazine named Anne-Marie one of the top 100 global thinkers in each of the past 4 years. She is a distinguished commentator on international and public affairs, which makes her an ideal speaker for our event this evening. Anne-Marie Slaughter.
Thank you. So I very much wanted to accept this invitation, quite honestly, because I want to be one of the audience who gets to hear all the different nominees and the prize winners. My work in the State Department with Secretary Hillary Clinton was largely inspired by the belief that we have a whole new generation of technology that can help solve a whole new generation of foreign policy problems. In working for Secretary Clinton, I came in, I wouldn't say a technological neophyte. I mean, I worked very well with a computer, and even in 2009, an iPad was not an essential part of your daily equipment. But shortly after I arrived, I can see that our old-fashioned technology is not working as well as it should, but nevertheless, shortly after I arrived, a young man of 35 or so, named Alec Ross, was appointed Secretary Clinton's Special Advisor for Innovation. Prior to coming to the State Department, he had worked on bringing digital technology across the digital divide, ensuring that people around the world had access to the same technology that we do. He had then been part of electing President Obama through the profound and very ingenious, innovative use of social technology, social media. Secretary Clinton, one of the things that makes her so great is she knows how to learn from her mistakes. She fully understood that part of the reason she had not been elected president was in part because she had a traditional top-down, old-fashioned campaign, and President Obama had a bottom-up social media campaign. So what did she do? She hired one of the principal architects of that campaign to be her advisor for innovation. What followed actually made the State Department, that huge, clunky bureaucracy. And indeed, all of Washington, you see these enormous buildings, these enormous siloed buildings, very hierarchical. Our technology in the State Department was so bad that it wasn't quite Wang computers, but it had been for a very long time. It was so bad that we had all sorts of ways of using social media and new technology to get around it. But suddenly, we became a source of innovation. With Alec Ross and I worked together to inaugurate what we call 21st century statecraft, which was essentially to use technology, and specifically America's technological edge, to try to help people around the world address a range of problems that affect all of us, from health to education, to the environment, to jobs, to political communication, to accountability, to civic participation. We led technology delegations called Tech Dels, where we took the head of Google and Twitter to Iraq to talk to Iraqi politicians about how they could be more accountable, to Russia, where we developed an app that was the equivalent of what to expect when you're expecting on a cell phone, so that Russian women, I can see several women who understand what I'm talking about, Russian women could figure out week by week what to expect when they were pregnant, to figure out what they needed, something that most American women take for granted. I led a technology delegation to Liberia and Sierra Leone, bringing American technologists to talk to NGOs and government officials and telecom companies about how they could use technology to address the tremendous problems of women in both those countries, where maternal mortality is astonishingly high, in part because women who are expecting do not have the ability even to communicate to a clinic, much less to get telemedicine. So we helped launch all sorts of different technological initiatives. We brought in Ushahidi to help the Haitians after the Haitian earthquake with the actually developed crisis mapping technology, so that Haitians who were far affected by the earthquake could actually text in a message about who needed help, and that message was translated by Creole speakers in the United States, then through Ushahidi's technology, not only to the State Department, but to the military. We created tech camps where American technologists go to countries and teach NGOs how to use all the different media tools that our civil society uses, sometimes to circumvent government, often to communicate to each other. We ran conferences on mobile apps for women, on mobile money, another place that I've actually worked with Citi, on mobile health, and all the ways, again, that the very simplest technology of a cell phone can help transform people's lives in the most distant communities. The bottom line is that the entire enterprise of foreign policy, or more specifically of diplomacy, has fundamentally changed. Diplomacy was premised on the idea that it was very, very difficult to communicate across borders. So difficult that you had to send physical people there and build an embassy, and the people in that embassy had to send you back what were originally dispatches and then cables, and now, as the world knows, through WikiLeaks, email, and electronic communication. But in fact, today, it is in theory possible to communicate with every single individual on the face of the earth. If we imagine that every person had a cell phone, which is hardly difficult to imagine, given the growth, we have 4 billion people already who have cell phones. In theory, it is possible for a place like the United States government to text every single one, to communicate with every single one, which truly changes the whole notion of diplomacy. And to give you just a couple of examples how we use that, our ambassador in New Zealand spends 20% of his time on his blog and his Twitter account. He has more followers than the readers of the largest newspaper in New Zealand, which means an American diplomat using basic technology can communicate with more people than read the largest newspaper. So these are very profound changes, and with relatively simple innovations, we managed to be on the forefront of foreign policy. But honestly, I think we were behind the curve, because when I left the State Department and returned to the ability to speak freely and to answer questions rather than to figure out how to avoid answering questions, when I look at the world and I see that 6 billion people, and I see how they are concentrated, I no longer see a world of 194 states. I see a world of cities. I see a world in which millions of people, I lived in Shanghai for a year, so 18 million, 20 million, 25 million, 35 million people come together in cities, and those cities network around the world. Many of you may have noticed the United States has not done a great deal on climate change recently. President Obama tried to pass legislation in his first term. It didn't go anywhere. We reached a deal at Copenhagen. It wasn't a real treaty. We haven't done very much at the governmental level. Where things are happening? Right here in New York. Mayor Bloomberg and former President Clinton are the co-chairs of the C40. That is 40 of the biggest cities around the world who are leading the way in combating climate change and exchanging best practices, forging partnerships, getting funding, imposing all sorts of different rules and programs to actually see how you can come up with the best ways to fight climate change. They're on the front lines, as we just found out with Sandy, but again, having lived in Shanghai, many of the world's great cities are right on the front lines, and they're the ones leading the way. So I just want to talk a little bit about some of my favorite innovations, bringing together technology, particularly in cities. The one I like the best, I was just talking to one of our audience members who's from Brazil, who works for The Economist. In Rio, Google Maps and the American Consulate are working together to give people in the favelas the ability to put themselves on the map. The favelas are not mapped. They literally don't exist in the city. It would be as if Queens and the Bronx and Brooklyn and Staten Island didn't exist. Now, many Manhattanites live in that world, but quite seriously, this technology allows people in the favelas to put themselves on the map. If you're not on the map, you can't get city services. You can't have an address, you can't get post, much less water, electricity, and everything else. So this app actually allows people physically to put themselves on the map. Another one, and I think many of you have probably heard of this one from the New Urban Mechanics in Boston. I lived in Boston for almost 20 years, or in Cambridge. I know the state of the roads there. This app, you put it on your cell phone, and as you drive on Boston streets, and you bounce like this on Boston streets, the app records the vibration, and it is sent immediately to a central location where they can then figure out not just where existing potholes are, because you don't really need an app for that. You can see an existing pothole. They can figure out where potholes are about to break out. They can see where there's a rise in the pavement and know that that is where they actually have to intervene. Others, much more simply, I participated in an urban hackathon for the Personal Democracy Forum in June, and there are hackathons happening in cities across the country and around the world. Apps that tell you when your bus or train is running late. Something that doesn't seem earth-shaking unless you're the one who's running late, and you need to know exactly when to catch your bus or your train. Or on a much more serious level, something like Harassmap in Cairo. Many of you have probably read about the amount of harassment of women on the streets in Cairo. Ushahidi has developed a technology that allows every woman to text in where she's been harassed to, again, a central map that allow police, if they care, lots of NGOs and other services to try then to figure out how to combat harassment. I could give you hundreds of others, and you probably know many more even than I do. But I actually want to end on a much more cautionary note. I started by telling you the excitement of bringing technology to the United States State Department, the dynamism in many cities across the country and around the world. But frankly, the greater the concentration of people, the more densely populated a city is, the less we actually know each other. It is one of the great paradoxes. In a small town, we have few people, but we know them. In New York, and I've lived here often, we have millions of people and we don't know each other. That's actually a big problem for making much of this technology work. Technology is only a tool, right? It has no valence. Nuclear technology can be used for good and for very ill. Any of our technologies can be used for good or ill. It's the human connection that ultimately determines how we use technology. The trust, the commitment, the belief that somebody will actually pay attention and act. That's what makes the difference. We're going to see some incredible innovations tonight. We're going to see some high tech and some low tech. But again, sometimes it's the simplest technology, the technology that allows us to connect to each other as human beings, that makes the greatest difference. I'll just give you the example of Cory Booker, the mayor of Newark. And many people, if you spend as much time on Twitter as I do, know that last year during the 2 years ago, during the enormous snowstorm, Cory Booker, unlike Mayor Bloomberg, was renowned for actually having people tweet him about where snow was piled up and where city services were failing. This year during Sandy, I actually followed him on Twitter. I didn't have power, but I could charge up my computer and iPad and follow him. And it was extraordinary. He, as the mayor, was in direct touch with thousands of his citizens who tweeted him, and he would tweet back saying, "We're trying, we're coming, I can't do anything about that now, but I know you're there." It was an amazing demonstration of, again, the fact that often knowing that government is there and it pays attention can make all the difference. In contrast, I heard this summer about a program in Tanzania that had been very carefully developed so that members of one of the principal cities could text in where city services were lacking, where there was no power, where there was no waste collection, any of the problems that you might have. Very elaborate application, lots went into it, nobody used it. When they did a survey on why nobody used it, the answer was, because we don't really believe anybody cares. Why would you text it in if you know no one's going to be on the other end? Cory Booker is exactly the opposite. Through a very simple technology, he managed to demonstrate to his citizens that somebody was there and somebody cared. And even if he couldn't fix it, somebody was, in fact, paying attention. I think when we think about the great, exciting, dense, diverse, buzzing, vibrant, cutting-edge agglomeration that are our cities and that give us so much excitement and so much sense of human potential, it's worth remembering that in the end, technology, innovation can only work one human connection at a time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie, for drawing together your themes of diplomacy, technology, and networked cities, which I think sets us up very well for the rest of the evening. Our main course will now be served, and after that we will be hearing from Dame Zaha Hadid. Thank you very much.